Alright, so this video is going to run a little bit long because this is quite a big skill to cover, but I'm going to talk about how to find the theme, how to determine how the theme is shaped and refined by details in a story, and how to make an objective summary about fiction. So what theme is the message or moral of a story or a poem. Theme is always phrased as a statement or a sentence. It's not just like a single word or a phrase. And it's also non-specific. If you're mentioning specific characters or events from the story, then you're giving a summary, not a theme. Theme should be something that could apply to just about anyone, whether they are from Wallace, North Carolina, or China, or Mars. It's universal, a message that anyone could take away from reading it. And it's also phrased as a statement, not like a single word or a phrase. So for example, revenge would not be a theme, but revenge is never worth it might be a theme. So here's how you find the theme of a story. You think about what kind of big ideas are explored in the story. Is it love, revenge, sadness, success, any kind of big idea that is explored in the story, and then you decide what opinion the author is expressing about the big idea. So are they saying that success comes after hard work? Or are they saying that success is unattainable? No, with some stories they'll be very simple and you won't always need to use this process, but most of the works that you're reading in English 2 are a bit more complicated, so it might be helpful for you to find the big idea and then decide what opinions the author is expressing about the big idea. For example, if you take the movie Shrek, a big idea explored in the movie Shrek would be true love. And if I think about what opinion that movie is expressing about true love, then I think the theme is when someone truly loves you, they'll accept you for who you are. Now notice my theme is expressed as a complete sentence. It's not just a couple of words. I didn't specifically mention Shrek, Fiona, Donkey, or anything specific to the story here. This is something that could apply to just about anyone, so it has all the characteristics of the theme. I'm going to make a quick note here that stories can have lots of themes, and there is no one correct answer. I could have also said the big idea from Shrek is teamwork, and that the theme is that when people work together, they can accomplish anything. Another example of theme from How the Grinch Stole Christmas, the big idea there would be kindness. And what it's expressing about kindness is that you should treat others the way you want to be treated. A lot of people were very mean to the Grinch, and that's why he became mean. But when others started to treat him kindly, he began to treat others kindly as well. Here are some things that are not themes. Shrek and Fiona love each other. That is not a theme because it's mentioning specific characters here, and it's not universal. That's not something that could apply to my life. Love. Love is not a theme. Love can be a big idea, but it's not a theme because it's not expressing any opinions. It's not giving me any information. Overcoming obstacles. Once again, not a theme. It's not telling me anything about overcoming obstacles. Has to be expressed as a complete sentence. I'm going to want you to be able to annotate for theme. Annotation is basically pointing out patterns, ideas, thoughts you have in your reading as you go, and this is going to help you a lot when it comes to further analysis of works than you're probably used to doing. So when I'm looking for theme, I make note of characters, events, and word choices that support the theme in some way, that relate to it in some kind of way. And anytime you're analyzing anything, you need to pay special attention for repetition of words or ideas. Look for patterns. It's probably best to use a pencil, and you're probably going to need to read it multiple times. All right. Now I'm going to briefly cover objective summary. Objective summary is much easier to deal with than theme, I think. It's just a summary of the main events of the story that is free of personal opinions. So you don't say if you think the story sucked or the character made a bad decision or anything that you think about the story. and it doesn't include any outside information. It's usually best to write these in present tense. So if I was going to write an objective summary of the movie Shrek, I might write something like this. Shrek is an ogre who lives alone in his swamp. After hearing about a reward for rescuing Princess Fiona from her tower, he teams up with Donkey to complete the mission. After rescuing Fiona, the three of them travel together to deliver Fiona to Lord Farquaad. During this journey, Shrek and Fiona fall in love, but do not tell each other how they feel. At Fiona and Lord Farquaad's wedding, Shrek confesses his feelings for her, and Fiona's true form, an ogre, is revealed. Donkey and the dragon from Fiona's tower enter together, and the dragon eats Lord Farquaad. Shrek and Fiona get married and live happily ever after. Alright, so I did not include any information that did not come from the movie. I did not include any of my own opinions about the movie or anything that happens in it, and I only included the most important details. I'm going to read the first couple pages of Lamb to the Slaughter by Roald Dahl with you, and as I'm doing this, I'm going to show you how I would annotate for theme. Now, as I said in the PowerPoint, you need something at least twice in order to fully annotate it and get the detail. Because when you're reading it the first time, trying to understand what happens, but when you look back a second time, you'll notice more than you did the first time. I will tell you before I even start reading this that one of the central ideas of the story is betrayal, and I'll tell you what the theme is after I've read this little excerpt from Lamb to the Slaughter with you. So let's just assume that I've already read the story once through, because I have, and that this is a second read through as I'm annotating and finding evidence for how the theme emerges and is shaped and refined by specific details. So I'm looking for characters, events, and word choices that somehow support the theme as I go. So, here we begin. Lamb to the Slaughter by Roald Dahl. The room was warm and clean, the curtains drawn, the 2 table lamps alight, hers and the one by the empty chair opposite. On the sideboard behind her, 2 tall glasses, soda water, whiskey, fresh ice cubes in the thermos bucket. Mary Maloney was waiting for her husband to come home from work. Alright, so because I've already read this story, I know that Mary Maloney is central to the theme, so I'm going to go ahead and underline her name because she's really important to the theme. I would say that her entire character arc is what makes the theme what it is. So she's waiting for her husband to come home from work. Now and again she would glance up at the clock, but without anxiety, merely to please herself with the thought that each minute gone by made it nearer the time when he would come home. Alright, so I'm going to make a note here that Mary really wants to see her husband because she's anticipating him coming home. She wants him to be home. I'll say Mary loves her husband to make things simple. So she's sitting here waiting for her husband. Where did I stop? There was a slow, smiling air about her in everything she did. The drop of a head as she bent over her sewing was curiously tranquil. Her skin, for this was her 6th month with child, had acquired a wonderful translucent quality. The mouth was soft, and the eyes, with their new placid look, seemed larger and darker than before. When the clock said 10 minutes to 5, she began to listen, and a few moments later, punctually as always, she heard the tires on the gravel outside, and the car door slamming, footsteps passing the window, the key turning in the lock. She laid aside her sewing, stood up, and went forward to kiss him as he came in. "Hello, darling," she said. "Hello, darling," he answered. Okay, I'm going to pause here and note the repetition of the word darling. Now, if I think about what the word darling makes me think of, it's really affectionate. Alright, sorry, I was just interrupted there. As I was saying, the word darling is very affectionate. You use it with someone that you care about, and they repeated that. So I wanted to make a note of that. Remember, the central idea here is betrayal. So if you're thinking as you're reading along with me, either Mary is going to betray her husband, or her husband's going to betray Mary. And the author, Roald Dahl here, is setting this up so that we see they have a very affectionate relationship, or at least they seem to. Throughout this first paragraph here, we find out that Mary is pregnant. We find out she loves her husband. She waits for him to come home. She looks forward to seeing him. She wants to kiss him as he comes in. And they both call each other darling. So far, Roald Dahl, the author, has set up their relationship to be very affectionate and loving. But as we know, someone's betraying someone. So let's see what's going to happen next. She took his coat and hung it in the closet. Then, as she walked over and made the drinks, a strongish one for him, a weak for her. And soon she was back again in her chair with the sewing, and he in the other opposite, holding the tall glass with both hands, rocking it so the ice cubes tinkled against the side. For her, this was always a blissful time of day. She knew he didn't want to speak much until the first drink was finished, and she, on her side, was content to sit quietly, enjoying his company after the long hours alone in the house. She loved to luxuriate in the presence of this man, and to feel, almost as a sunbather feels the sun, that warm male glow that came out of him to her when they were alone together. She loved him for the way he sat loosely in a chair, for the way he came in a door, or moved slowly across the room with long strides. She loved the intent, far look in his eyes when they rested in her, the funny shape of the mouth, and especially the way he remained silent about his tiredness, sitting still with himself until the whiskey had taken some of it away. Alright, so in this paragraph we find out some more details about how Mary feels about her husband. I'm going to say, underline, this was a blissful time of day, and then I'm going to underline some of the things that it mentions that Mary loves about her husband. She loves how she feels, a warm glow when she's around him. I'm going to put the way he sat in a chair, the way he came in a door, the way he moves across the room, the look in his eyes, and out to the side I'm going to make a note so I can remember why I underlined this. Reasons Mary loves her husband. Tired, darling? Yes, he said, I'm tired. Oh, wait, she repeated darling again. Circle that. Yes, he said, I'm tired. And as he spit an unusual thing, he lifted his glass and drained it in one swallow, although there was still half of it. At least half of it left. She wasn't really watching him, but she knew what he had done because she heard the ice cubes falling back against the bottom of the empty glass when he lowered his arm. He paused a moment, leaning forward in the chair, then got up and went slowly over to fetch himself another. So I'm going to note right here, a shift happens. A shift means a change of some kind. So up until this point, there haven't really been any signs of trouble in the relationship, but he just drained his glass, which was half full, all in one gulp, and went to go get another drink. So when somebody's drinking like this, that makes you think that either they've had a really rough day or they're about to do something difficult. They're trying to get the liquid courage going or whatever. So I'm going to say husband drinking a lot implies conflict. Some kind of conflict is going on with the husband here. We don't know what it is yet. I'll get it, she cried, jumping up. Sit down, he said. When he came back, she noticed that the new drink was dark amber with the quantity of whiskey in it. Oh, so it's saying that there's quite a lot of alcohol in it. So this idea of the stressful time with her husband is being emphasized here. Darling again. Shall I get your slippers? No. She watched him as he began to sip the dark yellow drink, and she could see little oily swirls in the liquid because it was so strong. Once again, emphasizing how much he's drinking here. I think it's a shame, she said, that when a politician gets to be as senior as you, they keep him walking about on his feet all day long. He didn't answer, so she bent her head again and went on with her sewing. But each time he lifted the drink to his lips, she heard the ice cubes clinking against the side of the glass. Emphasizing the drinking again. "Darling," she said, "would you like me to get you some cheese? I haven't made any supper because it's Thursday." "No," he said. Darling again. Once again, we are emphasizing Mary really loves her husband and she's very affectionate towards him, but some kind of conflict is going on with her husband. Maybe it relates to Mary. Maybe he doesn't feel the same way. We don't know yet. "If you're too tired to eat out," she went on, "it's not too late. It's still not too late. There's plenty of meat and stuff in the freezer, and you can hit right here and move out of the chair." So I'm going to annotate here, he's really tired from her job and she just wants to take care of him. For an answer, a smile, a little nod, but he made no sign. "Anyway," she went on, "I'll get you some cheese and crackers first." "I don't want it," he said. Uh-oh. Husband doesn't return her affection? Why doesn't he want it? Of course he'd be hungry after a long day of working. We'll see. She moved uneasily in her chair, the large eyes still watching his face. "But you must eat. I'll fix it anyway, and then you get or not." She stood up and placed her sewing on the table by the lamp. "Sit down," he said. "Just for a minute, sit down." It wasn't till then that she began to get frightened. So she's frightened that he's going to betray her. She's worried that something's going on in his head, something different from what she's expecting, so she's worried about him betraying her. "Go on," he said. "Sit down." She lowered herself back slowly into the chair, watching him all the time with those large, bewildered eyes. He had finished the second drink and was staring down into the glass, frowning. I'm going to circle the word bewildered here because she's still afraid. Probably afraid of him betraying her, and he's still drinking a lot. "Listen," he said, "I've got something to tell you." "What is it, darling? What's the matter?" He had now become absolutely motionless, and he kept his head down so that the light from the lamp beside him fell across the upper part of his face, leaving the chin and mouth in shadow. She noticed there was a little muscle moving near the corner of his left eye. "This is going to be a bit of a shock to you, I'm afraid," he said. "But I've thought about it a good deal, and I've decided the only thing to do is tell you right away. I hope you won't blame me too much." So he's telling her something that's a shock. If it's something shocking, then it's something surprising but in a bad way. So it's a betrayal. And he told her it didn't take long, 4 or 5 minutes at most, and she stayed very still through it all, watching him with some kind of dazed horror as he went further and further away from her with each word. So she's in dazed horror, so she's shocked, sad, afraid. That's what I think of when I read the words dazed horror. And he's going further and further away from her with each word, so he doesn't love her back. "So there it is," he added, "and I know it's kind of a bad time to be telling you, but there simply wasn't any other way. Of course I'll give you money and see you're looked after, but there needn't be any fuss. I hope not anyway. It wouldn't be very good for my job." Oh, so he doesn't, Roald Dahl doesn't directly tell us what Mary's husband told. We can infer that he's leaving her because of this line here. "Of course I'll give you and see that you're looked after." So there's he's leaving her. There would be no other reason why he would be giving her money, and we all already knew that this was bad news. So, all right, so this is the betrayal, right? But is it the only betrayal in the story? Let's continue. Her first instinct was not to believe any of it, to reject it all. It occurred to her that perhaps he hadn't even spoken, that she herself had imagined the whole thing. Maybe, if she went about her business and acted as though she hadn't been listening, then later, sort of again, she might find none of it ever happened. So Mary is in disbelief at the betrayal from her husband. This shows how people react to betrayal. She loved him, they had a good marriage, and now all of a sudden he's leaving her, so she doesn't believe it. "I'll get the supper," she managed to whisper, and this time he didn't stop her. When she walked across the room, she couldn't feel her feet touching the floor. She couldn't feel anything at all, except a slight nausea and a desire to vomit. Everything was automatic now. Down the steps to the cellar, the light switch, the deep freeze, the hand inside the cabinet taking hold of the first object it met. She lifted it out and looked at it. It was wrapped in paper, so she took off the paper and looked at it again. A leg of lamb. All right. I'm going to circle her emotions, how she's feeling here, because this is once again her reaction to her husband's betrayal, which relates to the central idea. All right, and if I were reading this for the first time, I might say, why does he bother to say that it's a lamb? Well, an author doesn't mention a very specific detail like that without a reason, and we're about to find out why. All right, then. They would have lamb for supper. She carried it upstairs, holding the thin bone end of it over with both her hands, and as she went through the living room, she saw him standing over by the window with his back to her, and she stopped. "For God's sake," he said, hearing her but not turning around. "Don't make supper for me. I'm going out." All right, this line shows the difference in Mary's emotions versus her husband's emotions. So at that point, Mary Maloney simply walked up behind him, and without any pause, she swung the big frozen leg of lamb high in the air and brought it down as hard as she could on the back of his head. She might just as well have hit him with a steel club. She stepped back a pace, waiting, and the funny thing was that he remained standing there for at least 4 or 5 seconds, gently swaying. Then he crashed to the carpet. So what? What? Mary just hit her husband on the head with a frozen leg of lamb, which might as well have been a steel club. So what Roald Dahl is saying here is Mary has assaulted her husband. Who's betraying who? So that's how I would annotate it to begin with. And if you want to see what happens to Mary Maloney and if she gets away with it, you can come ask me to see how you can read the rest of the story. Alright, so now that I've read this excerpt, I can begin to think about where the theme emerges and then how it's shaped and refined by details later in the story. I want to pick only the strongest pieces of evidence for the theme that I can. So, we're talking about where theme emerges. That means where does it first appear? In this first part of the story, the author is sort of building up to the idea of betrayal, but it hasn't quite reached it yet. I don't think betrayal starts to happen at all until the shift here occurs, where her husband when her husband shows signs of conflict. So I'm going to say here is where a theme emerges. And then, as we go throughout the rest of the story, we can find other things that have helped to refine the theme. So, every time the word darling is repeated, every time the husband's internal conflict is emphasized by his drinking, when her husband tells her that he's leaving her, when she reacts emotionally and she can't even believe it and then she just feels numb and nauseous, when she eventually decides to her husband with a piece of lamb. All of these are to help develop the theme. So, I thought here at the part where she attacks her husband was praying. So if I figure out what the theme is for the story overall, then let's think about it this way. So if my central idea is betrayal, to find out the theme, I have to ask myself, what message is this story sending about betrayal? Well, in the beginning of the story, Mary did not predict that her husband would leave her, and then later in the story, her husband could not have predicted that she would murder him with a piece of frozen lamb. So I think what this is expressing about betrayal is that betrayal happens when you least expect it.